Every time you fill your gas tank, flip a light switch, or buy anything made of plastic, you're participating in a global system that depends on a waterway just 30 miles wide. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow passage between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula, carries 21% of the world's petroleum liquids through shipping lanes barely 2 miles wide in each direction. This choke point doesn't just move oil, it moves the foundation of modern civilization. And it sits at the center of one of the world's most complex geopolitical situations. The Persian Gulf contains half of the world's proven oil reserves, making it the most concentrated source of energy on Earth. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, the UAE, and Qatar, nations that collectively hold the keys to global energy security, all depend on this single waterway to export their oil to the world. But geography has created a strategic paradox. All of this oil, all of these reserves, can only reach global markets through one route, the Strait of Hormuz. There are no meaningful alternatives, no pipelines with sufficient capacity, no other waterways. Just this 30-mile gap between the Musandam Peninsula of Oman and the Iranian coastline. The numbers reveal the scale of this dependency. Approximately 21 million barrels of oil pass through Hormuz every single day. That's enough crude oil to fill nearly 1,400 Olympic-sized swimming pools. For perspective, this represents more oil than the entire United States produces domestically. The strait's physical characteristics make this concentration even more remarkable. At its narrowest point, the waterway spans just 30 miles, but the actual shipping lanes are far more constrained. International maritime law designates specific corridors for inbound and outbound traffic, each only 2 miles wide. These narrow channels force some of the world's largest vessels, supertankers that can stretch over 1,000 feet in length, to navigate with extraordinary precision. A typical transit takes more than 3 hours for a fully loaded tanker. During this time, these massive vessels, some carrying 2 million barrels of crude oil, move at reduced speeds through waters that can be as shallow as 180 feet in some areas. The margin for error is minimal, and the consequences of any disruption are global. The strategic importance of Hormuz extends far beyond the oil itself. The strait represents a fundamental vulnerability in the global supply chain that touches virtually every aspect of modern life. When oil prices spike due to concerns about Hormuz, the effects ripple through every sector of the economy. Consider the countries most dependent on this waterway. Japan imports 80% of its oil through Hormuz, making the strait essential to the world's third-largest economy. South Korea relies on the strait for 75% of its oil imports. China, the world's largest oil importer, receives 45% of its petroleum from Persian Gulf states, virtually all of which must pass through Hormuz. These dependencies create a web of strategic interests that extends far beyond the Middle East. European nations, despite their geographic distance, import significant quantities of Persian Gulf oil. India, with its rapidly growing economy, depends heavily on Gulf crude. Even the United States, despite its domestic oil production, imports substantial quantities of petroleum products that originate in the Persian Gulf. The physical infrastructure supporting this trade is equally impressive and vulnerable. The strait hosts some of the world's largest oil tankers, including very large crude carriers and ultra-large crude carriers, vessels so massive they require specialized ports and handling facilities. These ships represent floating assets worth hundreds of millions of dollars, carrying cargo valued in the tens of millions. Navigation through Hormuz requires exceptional skill and coordination. The strait's traffic separation scheme, managed by the International Maritime Organization, functions like a highway system for ships. Vessels must follow designated routes, maintain specific speeds, and coordinate with maritime traffic control systems. The complexity increases during periods of high traffic when dozens of tankers may be transiting simultaneously. The geopolitical dimensions of Hormuz center on Iran's unique geographic position. The Islamic Republic controls the northern shore of the strait, giving it significant influence over this critical waterway. Iran's naval capabilities in the region include fast attack craft, submarines, and coastal missile systems, assets that could potentially impact shipping operations. On the opposite side, the United States maintains a substantial naval presence in the region through its Fifth Fleet, headquartered in Bahrain. This force includes aircraft carriers, destroyers, and other vessels designed to ensure freedom of navigation through international waters. The ongoing presence of both Iranian and American naval forces creates a complex dynamic that has persisted for decades. The economic implications of any disruption to Hormuz traffic would be immediate and severe. Historical precedents demonstrate how quickly oil markets respond to concerns about the strait. During various periods of tension, oil prices have spiked by $20 to $30 per barrel within days, purely based on the possibility of supply disruptions. A complete closure of the strait, even temporarily, would create a global energy crisis unlike anything experienced in recent decades. The International Energy Agency estimates that alternative routes could handle only a fraction of Hormuz's normal traffic, and only after significant delays and at much higher costs. The Suez Canal and the Sumed pipeline could potentially carry some additional oil from the Persian Gulf, but these routes would require tankers to travel around the entire Arabian Peninsula, adding thousands of miles and weeks to journey times. The increased shipping costs alone would drive up oil prices substantially, even before considering the reduced overall capacity. Overland pipelines offer limited alternatives. The East-West pipeline across Saudi Arabia can transport some crude oil to Red Sea ports, but its capacity represents only a fraction of what normally moves through Hormuz. Similar constraints apply to other pipeline systems in the region. They were designed to supplement, not replace, maritime transport through the strait. The ripple effects of a Hormuz disruption would extend far beyond energy markets. Manufacturing industries dependent on petroleum-based feedstocks would face immediate supply constraints. Transportation costs would surge as airlines, shipping companies, and trucking firms confronted higher fuel prices. The plastics industry, which relies heavily on petroleum derivatives, would experience significant cost pressures. For ordinary consumers, the impact would manifest in multiple ways. Gasoline prices would spike immediately, affecting commuting costs and family budgets. Heating oil and natural gas prices would follow, increasing utility bills. The cost of goods transportation would rise, leading to higher prices for food, clothing, and consumer products across the board. The global nature of modern supply chains means that even countries with minimal direct oil imports from the Persian Gulf would feel the effects. A Hormuz closure would drive up oil prices worldwide, affecting all petroleum-consuming nations regardless of their specific supply sources. This interconnectedness reflects the fundamental role of oil as a globally traded commodity. Central banks and financial markets would face immediate challenges. Inflation expectations would rise as energy costs increased, potentially forcing monetary policy responses. Stock markets would likely decline as investors priced in higher operating costs for energy-intensive industries. Currency markets would fluctuate as oil-importing nations faced increased import costs. The strategic response options available to the international community remain limited. Military intervention to reopen the strait would carry enormous risks and uncertain outcomes. Diplomatic solutions require addressing underlying political tensions that have persisted for decades. Economic measures, such as releasing strategic petroleum reserves, could provide temporary relief but wouldn't address the fundamental supply constraint. The development of alternative energy sources and transportation routes represents a long-term response to Hormuz dependency, but these solutions require years or decades to implement at scale. Renewable energy infrastructure, while growing rapidly, cannot immediately replace the massive oil flows through the strait. New pipeline projects face geographic, political, and financial obstacles that limit their near-term viability. The Strait of Hormuz embodies the fundamental tension between geographic reality and global economic needs. This narrow waterway, formed by geological processes over millions of years, has become the linchpin of modern industrial civilization. The concentration of energy resources in the Persian Gulf, combined with the lack of viable alternatives to maritime transport, has created a dependency that touches every aspect of contemporary life. Understanding Hormuz means recognizing how geographic choke points shape global power dynamics. The strait's strategic importance extends far beyond the nations that border it, influencing energy security policies, military deployments, and economic planning worldwide. Every major economy must consider Hormuz in its strategic calculations, making this narrow waterway one of the most significant geographic features in international relations. The ongoing situation at Hormuz illustrates a broader truth about global trade. The modern world economy depends on a surprisingly small number of critical passages and choke points. The Strait of Hormuz, the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, and the Strait of Malacca collectively handle the majority of global maritime trade. Each represents a potential vulnerability in the interconnected system that delivers goods, energy, and raw materials worldwide. As global energy consumption continues to grow, particularly in developing economies, the importance of Hormuz is likely to persist for decades to come. Despite advances in renewable energy and energy efficiency, petroleum will remain a crucial component of the global energy mix for the foreseeable future. This reality ensures that the Strait of Hormuz will continue to occupy a central position in international strategic thinking. The story of Hormuz ultimately reflects the complex relationship between geography and globalization. In an era of instant communication and rapid transportation, physical geography still matters profoundly. A 30-mile wide strait in the Persian Gulf continues to influence gas prices in suburban America, manufacturing costs in China, and energy security policies in Europe. This geographic reality shapes not just economics, but geopolitics, environmental policy, and technological development. The concentration of global oil flows through such a narrow passage creates incentives for military presence, diplomatic engagement, and strategic planning that extend far beyond the immediate region. It drives investment in alternative energy sources, pipeline projects, and strategic petroleum reserves worldwide. The Strait of Hormuz stands as perhaps the most vivid example of how a single geographic feature can influence the daily lives of billions of people. Every time global tensions rise in the Persian Gulf, oil markets respond within hours. Every policy decision affecting the strait's security has implications for energy prices, inflation rates, and economic growth worldwide. In the end, the Strait of Hormuz represents more than just a shipping lane. It's a window into the fundamental dependencies that underpin modern civilization. Understanding this choke point means understanding how geography, economics, and geopolitics intersect to shape the world we live in. And as long as oil remains central to the global economy, this 30-mile wide passage will continue to influence the fate of nations and the daily lives of people everywhere.